Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Dust swirled off the ridgeline as Val crouched behind a patch of scrub, eyes steady on the valley floor. The air was thin and dry, mountains stacked like broken teeth around the basin. Her radio clicked softly in her ear, short check-ins, no chatter. She pressed 2 fingers to the dirt, feeling the faint tremor of a generator miles out. Not loud. Not right. The map said, abandoned training site. Her gut said otherwise. She pulled her gloves tight and scanned again. A decoy camp looked casual, almost lazy, tarps sagging, footprints everywhere. This place was too neat. The paths were swept. The trash pile was staged. Even the wind chimes of loose corrugated tin were silent, wired down so they wouldn't sing. Ghost quiet, she murmured. Viper sense, her squad called it. She didn't argue. Memory slid in like a breath of cold Montana morning. Gallatin Range. 10 years earlier. Ghost Hawk set a steel mug on a stump. Look, listen, then move, he said, calm as stone. Whisper stood a few yards back, teaching her how to step through pine needles without a sound, how to feel the wind on her cheek and know which way it would carry her scent. 3 steps, stop. Breathe. Count. She learned to read a day-old boot scuff like a page in a book. Back to now. Val lowered her binos. Shapes hid where shadows shouldn't last. The slope above the camp funneled into a rocky chute, good for trapping anyone who entered. If she were setting an ambush, she'd place shooters there, and behind that black seam in the wall. She touched the mic, Viper to team, I've got pattern anomalies. Treat this like hot ground. A beat of static. The reply came, level, copy, Viper. Short recon only. She nodded to herself and eased downhill, keeping the ridge at her back. The silence pressed in. No goat bells. No kids. No stray dog bark. The kind of silence that means somebody worked hard to make the world sound normal and failed. She stopped at a dry wash and knelt, tracing a swirl of dust with her knuckle. The curve was too clean, like someone had brushed away tracks and overdid it. Another 10 yards and she found it, a nail head glinting from inside a rock crack, the end of a tripwire tucked into shadow. She didn't touch it. She just looked up the slope and marked 3 more anchor points by geometry alone. Someone had built a funnel, and it wasn't for rain. Her breathing stayed slow. This wasn't fear. It was math. Angles, timing, fields of fire. Viper, status, a voice asked softly. Contact indicators without contact, she said. Recommend offset route and verify rear security. Do not enter the low ground. Roger. She shifted left, following the contour and minding the wire's arc. On the valley floor, the abandoned tents were exactly 15 feet apart, too uniform for men who'd already left. A camera eye, scabbed with dust, peered from under a crate. She spotted 2 more, each aimed to make a perfect grid. She pictured a hand in a dark room, watching a wall of tiny screens and waiting for silhouettes. She tasted grit and thought of boiled coffee by a campfire in Bozeman, Ghost Hawk telling her that most traps are designed to be found by the careless and sprung by the confident. If it looks wrong, it's because someone worked hard to make it look right, he said. Whisper handed Val a leather cord then, told her to carry wind and memory, to never lose the shape of a place once she'd walked it. She still wore that cord under her plate carrier. The team edged into view to her right, spread wide, low signatures. Val raised a hand and flattened it twice. Stop. The lead ranger froze, eyes on her. She pointed to the wire, then to the chute, then sliced a line across her throat. The message was clear. The leader nodded, signaled a reroute, and began backing them into the rocks. A small mercy, no one had blundered into the bowl yet. She slid behind a boulder and built a quick mental map, observation points, likely kill zones, fallback tunnels if the camp connected to the cliffs. That generator hum, faint but constant, meant power underground. If there was power, there were comms. If there were comms, someone was listening. She checked her watch. Afternoon haze. Good for them if they stayed high. Bad for anyone who thought the basin offered cover. Heat shimmer hides movement until it doesn't. A whisper of pebble on stone reached her from the left. She turned just enough to catch a shadow separate from the wall and melt back. Not a goat. Not wind. A man with patience. Good. That meant she wasn't paranoid. It meant the board was set and the clock had been running before they arrived. She keyed the mic again. Viper to team. Confirm exfil path North Ridge. This site is an ambush. Stay out of the bowl. Understood, came the reply. We move on your call. She exhaled. Discipline would keep them breathing. Still, the route-in was tighter than she liked. She took one last look at the camp, at the quiet tarps and the obedient dust. Somewhere out there, a commander was smiling, certain he'd choreographed the next 10 minutes of their lives. Val ran a finger along the leather cord at her collarbone and filed the map deeper into her head. On me, she said, voice steady. We're pulling back high and clean. The valley didn't answer. The mountains didn't care. But the silence felt heavier now, like a held breath waiting to be released. And Val knew, sure as sunrise on the Gallatin Pines, that this was only the start. Seconds later the valley finally exhaled. A pressure wave punched the ridge as claymore-sized blasts ripped the chute. Rock and dust geysered upward, turning daylight into grit. Incoming, someone shouted, but the echoes drowned him out. Val drove her shoulder to the ground, shielded her head, and counted the gaps between detonations. 3 charges, staggered, then a volley of controlled bursts from the black seam in the wall. Not random. Scripted. North Ridge, move, she called, but the line snapped. A second set of charges collapsed the side path, cutting the team in two. She pushed to her knees, eyes stinging. Muzzle flashes winked from false rocks. A tracer stitched the dirt a foot from her boot. She rolled, brought her carbine up, and sent 3 rounds to the dark seam. The flashes disappeared. Good. Not safe, just quiet. A shock slammed her from the right, heat licking her cheek. She heard the dull thud of a concussion grenade right before it stole the sound from her skull. For a heartbeat the world went white. When the blur faded, hands were on her, fast and practiced. She swung an elbow, clipped a jaw, fought for her sling. A knee found her ribs, a boot took her wrist, zip ties bit. A hood went over her face. She felt the ground tilt as they dragged her, then the rattle of a pickup bed, steel cold through her vest. The engine growled. The mountains swallowed the noise. She focused on what she still had, pulse steady, breath controlled, pain mapped. She flexed wrists against the ties to feel the knot orientation. Plastic, double cinch, front loop low. Feet bound, but not hog-tied. Airflow under the hood was warm, fabric, not plastic. She cataloged scents, diesel, cheap tobacco, gun oil, damp stone. The ride wasn't long. They stopped, shoved her forward, then down a flight of steps. Concrete underfoot. Echo told her corridor width, about 6 feet, low ceiling, caged bulb hum. A metal door groaned. She was pushed inside and dropped to knees. Door closed. Bars clicked. She waited. In a minute the hood came off. A square cell, concrete walls sweating, a cot, a bucket, a drain. A single camera bubble in the corner, red LED barely breathing. She let her eyes travel once, slow and dull, like she was defeated. Then she lowered her chin and started working the map in her head. Vent above the door, 8 inches wide, bolted. A hairline crack along the baseboard where water had pulled calcium. The floor sloped a half-inch toward the drain. From the right wall, a faint vibration pulsed every 12 seconds, pump cycle or generator loop. She pressed her palm flat to the floor. The rhythm tremored through her bones. Machinery was close. Keys rattled outside. Guards brought water and a dented tray. One laughed too loud, overcompensating. Another lingered near the camera, shoulders tight. New to this. Good. She drank, slow. When they left, she counted footfalls. 3 men, one heavier, one with a drag on the left leg. Their steps faded down, not up. Sublevel. Hours later, the door opened again. The man who entered didn't wear a mask. Crisp beard, dry eyes, boots clean. He stood like a manager making rounds. "Welcome," he said in flat English. "You will be cooperative." Val met his gaze without a word. He waited, then smiled. "You are a medic. You will be useful alive." He left her the silence like a gift. She slept in 10-minute slices and spent the rest of the time listening. Pipes ticked when showers ran somewhere left. A radio chirped in a room beyond the corridor at predictable intervals, top of the hour, half past, quick acknowledgments. Shift changes hit at 0600 and 1800, the footsteps pattern told her. Food at 0705 and 1908, the tray clink was always the same. The camera swept the cell in a lazy half-arc every 20 seconds, cheap motor, audible click at each end. Blind spot low under the far cot leg for maybe 3 seconds per sweep. She eased to the drain and brushed the grate with her knuckle. Rust flaked. The screw heads were mauled, not serviced in months. She lay on the floor and put her ear to the crack along the baseboard. Air moved there, warm and dusty. A service crawlspace sat beyond, narrow but real. The vibration line ran under it like a heartbeat. Footsteps came again. Water. Tray. She took the cup with both hands, let a little spill on her fingers, then slipped 2 drops along the floor edge and watched where they traveled. The beads vanished under the baseboard at a point the width of her thumb, right of center. Lowest contour. If she could widen that seam, she could reach the void. Voices filtered through the door when the guards got bored. She let their words wash over her, sorting accents and egos. One bragged about a patrol assignment. One complained about extra hours. The third, the limper, never spoke. Shoes squeaked when he turned. He favored his right foot on longer stands. Guard rotations ran 2 on, 1 roaming, during the night hours. She marked it all. It wasn't much. It was enough. Sometime past midnight, the pump cycle paused for 11 seconds instead of 12. Maintenance, manual override, or a valve test. During that tiny silence, she felt a second hum layered beneath the first, offset by 3 seconds. 2 separate systems, 2 rooms, different loads. Where systems meet, people cut corners. Where corners are cut, a path exists. Val lay back on the cot, eyes on the red LED. Cooperative, the man had said. He wasn't wrong. She would cooperate with gravity, timing, and the habits of careless men. She flexed her fingers, feeling the leather cord at her collarbone. Whisper had told her once that you don't fight a river, you read it and step in where it will carry you. Here, in this concrete box, the river was schedule, sound, and fear. At 0300 the limper paused an extra beat outside her door. The camera clicked to the far side. The blind spot bloomed for 3 seconds. Val timed her breath to the sweep and the pump, and for the first time since the blast, she smiled. The cell wasn't a wall. It was a diagram. And the first line in that diagram had just revealed itself, so she traced it. 3 seconds of camera blindness, 12-second pump rhythm, the limper's extra beat outside her door, those were the strokes. Val slid off the cot as the motor clicked far side, planted her shoulder near the baseboard seam, and pressed the metal cup's rim into the chalky line. Concrete dust flaked. Another pass, then another. She wasn't breaking out tonight. She was shaving time off the wall. At 0312 the limper returned. He always paused, bored, wait on the good leg. She mistimed a cough on purpose. Keys rustled. Curiosity pulled him closer. When the camera swept away, she let the cup slip from her fingers and clatter. He swore, cracked the door to check. In that narrow wedge of space, she moved, a step and a pivot, both hands on the door edge, slamming it into his arm. The keys fell. His breath hitched. She shoved harder, trapping him. His pistol snagged on the jamb. She didn't reach for it. She drove 2 knuckles into the radial nerve, then lifted the door just enough to yank the keyring with her toes, flicking it back inside. He fought, boots scraping concrete. She let the door go just long enough for his arm to withdraw, then kicked it shut and turned the lock with a steady hand. He pounded once, twice, then limped away fast, shame outrunning pain. Siren? None. They wouldn't raise an alarm for a guard who embarrassed himself. Good. She sat on the cot, counted to 60, then crawled back to the seam. The keys were cheap, stamped brass. One small, square-shouldered key matched the service panel bolt pattern she'd felt under the baseboard. She smiled without showing teeth. The next day she acted dull, slow to drink, slow to stand. The camera watched. The braggy guard smirked. Al-Masri didn't come. Fine. She mapped the corridor by sound. Footfalls told 2 other doors near hers, 1 cell, 1 storage. The radio room lived deeper left, voices there favored curt phrases and numbers. Around 1855, kitchen steam fattened the air, at 1908, trays rolled. The pump drifted to an 11 count again at 23:17. Maintenance liked the graveyard hour. Night. She used the cup rim and a spoon handle to widen the baseboard gap. When the camera swept away, she froze. When it returned, she breathed. After an hour she could slide the smallest key through and find the bolt head. It took patience to seat the teeth. At 0246 the bolt turned a quarter. At 0251, it turned half. At 0256, the panel popped with a dry sigh. Warm dust exhaled from the crawlspace. She put her face to the dark and smelled wire insulation, old soap, and mouse. The void was 13 inches high, maybe 2 feet wide, running parallel to the corridor. A service artery. Perfect. She eased the panel back, set the screws near the cot leg, and waited for the 0300 blind spot. When it came, she slid the panel open, slithered in head first, and pulled the concrete back into place behind her. Inside, she became smaller, rib cage tight, elbows tucked. She moved by toes and fingertips, counting inches, dragging the leather cord against her collar to keep calm. The pump thudded on her right. The radio chatter pulsed ahead. Grates above her head patterned the ceiling like constellations. She stopped beneath the third and listened. 2 men. One typing, one drumming a pen. A printer chirped. Comms room. She noted distance and angle, then wriggled farther until the pump hum roared. A valve hissed. A second grate spilled brighter light. She peered up. Laundry. Piles of uniforms. A sink. A shelf of bleach, solvent, bandages. She grinned. Medicine was chemistry. Chemistry was leverage. Back to the comms grate. She waited for the loudest sweep of the pump to mask the sound, then lifted carefully. Screws were lazy tight. She nudged the grate aside an inch and fed the spoon handle up, hooking a cable loom at desk height. A tug, a snag, a clatter. The pen drummer cursed and rolled his chair back. In that startled beat, Val popped the grate, flowed up like smoke, and wrapped her forearm across his throat while her other hand shoved the chair into the typer's knees. He toppled, smacked his head on the desk edge, dazed but not out. She squeezed the first until his lights dimmed, then used his weight to pin the second. No shots. No shouts. The printer chirped again like nothing had changed. She zip-tied ankles and wrists with headset cords, gagged them with their own chamois, and dragged both under the desk. She didn't linger. She killed the camera in the corner by popping the cokes and left the monitor looping the last clean frame. On the console, she found the network map. Nodes glowed, perimeter cams, ammo bunker, armory door sensor. She didn't need root access, she needed mischief. She bumped the clock by 6 minutes, desynced 2 checkpoint pings, and set a false OK on a door sensor so a guard would stop trusting it. Paranoia was a seed. She watered it. She grabbed a pouch of zip ties, a multi-tool, a roll of duct tape, and a small radio. Back through the grate, down the vein, to the laundry. She cracked bleach and solvent into a bottle, added soap powder as a thickener, and stuffed the mix into a ripped glove. Pressure, seal, slow leak. A poor man's distraction if tossed into a vent. Footsteps hammered the hull. Not for her, for something else. Good chaos travels. She waited, body flat, as men ran past. When it thinned, she slid to a grate over the detention corridor and watched shoes. The limper returned, alone, touching his bruised forearm. She thought about mercy, then about patterns. She needed a uniform and a set of keys. She slid the grate an inch. Timing is a river. She stepped into it, dropping out of the grate like a shadow and landing behind the limper before his brain caught up. Her forearm knifed across his windpipe, her knee knocked his bad leg. He folded without a sound. She caught him, eased him to the floor, stripped his jacket and cap, and rolled him into the dark under the camera's lazy eye. Keys, radio, and a thin utility blade went into her borrowed pockets. The jacket smelled of dust and cheap cigarettes. It would do. Val moved with the corridor's pulse, head down, pace unhurried. Men notice speed, they don't notice routine. The distinct checkpoint pings were already nibbling at discipline. 2 guards bickered quietly about why the armory door showed green when it should have shown amber. She didn't slow. She let their doubt bloom. The laundry mix went first. She slid the glove bulb into a return vent and pierced it with the blade. The bleach solvent slurry misted into the duct. In 5 minutes the maintenance room would reek like a busted pool pump. In 10, someone would throw open every door searching for a leak. She wanted doors open. She wanted eyes in the wrong places. At the junction, she turned right to the ammo bunker. The sensor showed OK because she'd made it lie. The guard leaned on the frame, bored. She stumbled slightly, spilled a coil of duct tape, and muttered an apology in bad local dialect. He smirked, turned half away. That was enough. She shoved the tape into his face, rapped twice, spun him by the belt and dropped him to his knees. 2 zip ties later, he was a lump in the corner, blinking at the floor. She pawned his badge and keyed the lock. Inside, heat and gun oil. Wooden crates stenciled with numbers. She didn't need fireworks. She needed certainty. She pulled 2 bricks of plastic explosive from a demolition tray, checked the caps, and scrounged time pencils and a box of old flares. She cut the charge into 3 palms, armory junction, weapons rack spine, and a structural beam tucked behind a shelf. 20-minute delays on 2, 12 on the load-bearing member. Staggered collapse would create confusion without flash-banging her plan. On her way out, she dropped a flare behind an oily rag near an exhaust fan. It wouldn't burn now. It would look accidental later. She sealed the door, left the guard where he wouldn't be seen until the first complaint rose, and eased back into the flow. The comms room she'd already primed. She swung by long enough to nudge the clock another 3 minutes and loop 2 perimeter cameras for 60-second delays. That would make runners swear the place was haunted when doors they just saw closed were actually open. Fear compounds fast when proof contradicts eyes. The stink hit at the next corner, chlorine cutting through the corridor. Voices lifted, irritated, then alarmed. The maintenance door flung wide. A corporal with a wrench shouted for a shutoff that didn't exist. 2 guards peeled away to help. Good river. Go faster. She kept her walk casual until she cleared them, then broke into a silent half-trot down the service hall toward the command wing. Her stolen cap threw a neat shadow over her eyes. She belonged to the picture as long as she didn't stare. The command door posted 2 men with real posture. No tape trick here. She needed separation. She pressed the call button and barked into the box, pipeline leak near armory, authorized evac of south wing. Move. The nearest guard hesitated. The other checked his panel. It showed green across the armory because she'd told it to. He frowned, opened his mouth. Val flicked the thin blade and slashed the badge lanyard from his neck, then drove her shoulder into his chest and shoved him into his partner. They pinwheeled into the frame. She slid on the rebound, jammed the guard's badge to the reader, and rolled through as the door unlocked. A forearm jolted her ribs, she rode the pain and kicked the door shut behind her. They pounded once and fell back to their training, radioing, not rushing. Good. She wanted a minute. The command bunker was smaller than she'd pictured. Power makes men build rooms that feel big in their heads. Banks of monitors, a map table, a wall of binders. And at the center, calm as a winter lake, Al-Masri. He didn't startle. He took her in with one smooth sweep, eyes resting for a hair on the jacket that didn't quite fit her shoulders. I wondered when the ghost would step into the light, he said. Val didn't argue. She crossed to the table, slid the satchel of charges into her palm where he could not see, and scanned the map. Red circles sat over 3 towns she knew by their grid coordinates. A pinned note read, FOB, next week. Her throat cooled. Confirmation. She lifted her chin. Your clock is wrong, she said. He smiled slightly. Is it? Time is elastic when you own a valley. She let her gaze run the room like she was cowed. In the reflection of a blank monitor, she watched his hands. Open. Patient. The kind of calm that assumes the ending. She palmed a time pencil, bent it with a small snap against her belt, and slid the wafer behind a server rack. 12 minutes. She stepped left, nervous, and brushed a cable nest with her hip, setting a slow sag in the bundle that would tug free in a moment and briefly blank the center monitor. When it did, the guard outside radioed an all clear he didn't feel. Echoes of doubt rolled the hall. Why not run? Al-Masri asked. You had a path. Path's not the point, she said. Stopping you is. He considered that, studying her face like a puzzle. He reached for a drawer with the unhurried confidence of a man who preferred conversation but practiced endings. She moved first, not at his hand but at the ankle holster mirror painted on the glass. Her boot cut his reach, her palm shoved the drawer shut before his fingers closed. He twisted, fast and trained. She felt the line of his forearm and turned with it, borrowing the spin to slide him into the map table. Wood jumped. Papers spilled. His wrist snapped under her grip, the small gun fell and skittered under a chair. Hands hit the command door behind her. The latch bucked. She scooped the pistol, racked it, and shot the lock twice. The metal screamed. Outside, a voice shouted orders, her staggered charges ticked toward their cue. Al-Masri straightened, face hardening from condescension to calculation. You think you can burn this place down and walk out, he said. Not walk, she said. Climb. On cue, the armory beam charge kicked, deep and ugly, like a giant coughing. The floor lurched. Monitors bloomed static. Distant shouts avalanched into panic. The fan flare found breath, smoke crawled out of ducts. Val fired once into the ceiling sprinkler head. Water geysered, turning smoke into steam and steam into fog. In the whiteout, she vaulted the table, hooked Al-Masri's collar, and drove him into the server bank. He clawed at the pistol. She let him have the barrel for a split second, then rolled her wrist and used the lever to crash his knuckles into the steel. He howled. The second charge went, racks moaned, and the far wall shed dust. She shoved him to the ground and cuffed him to the leg of the map table with his own belt, tight enough to bruise. Call off the cells, she said, nodding at the comms console. Tell them the plan's dead. He laughed once, bitter and proud. She didn't wait. She jammed the headset on and keyed the master channel. All units, code halt. Execute scrub. Reinforce north exit, fire breach. Her accent was flat, her tone bored. Chaos obeys authority even when it's borrowed. Through the fog she ripped the emergency binder, slid the Intel flash drive into her pocket, and planted her last charge behind the command rack with a 6-minute pencil. The door shook again. She grabbed the server tower's crash bar, popped the side panel, and pulled 2 cards. The monitors died in a sigh. Al-Masri stared at her, half vertical, half beaten. 1 soldier, he rasped. 1 week. Less, she said, and glanced at the ticking clock only she knew. She slung the satchel, edged to the maintenance hatch she'd spied in the reflection earlier, and forced it with the multi-tool. Air rushed cold from the shaft. Above, a ladder climbed toward a grate she'd mapped on her first pass. Below her, the compound howled, a wounded animal looking for teeth. She stepped onto the rungs and started up as another explosion rolled the corridors into one long roar. The ladder rattled under her boots, heat puffed up the shaft. Halfway, a gust pushed steam past her face and then cleared. She reached the grate, tested it with the multi-tool, and pried it just enough to see the night, thin moon, wind sliding off black rock, the valley lit by jittering orange where the armory threw sparks into the ducting. She shouldered it open, rolled onto gravel, and lay flat, counting breaths until her hearing settled. Shouts tangled below, orders fighting panic. She crawled to a low lip of stone and looked back. The command wing vented smoke like a busted lung. Good. The clock she'd set was doing its work. She kept low and moved along the roofline to a service hatch she'd marked on her first crawl. It dropped into a tool closet 2 doors from comms. In the fog of alarms they were watching hallways, not ceilings. She slid down, hugged shadow, and reached the comms room she'd staged. Her 2 sleeping operators were still trussed, one had wriggled a foot free. She fixed it, quick and quiet, then went for the console. The network was limping but alive. She yanked a hardline, plugged the small radio she'd pocketed, and opened a narrow window on a frequency she knew wouldn't be their first guess. She spoke low, clipped, feeding grid, head count, status, and a rolling threat picture. No drama. Numbers, angles, timings. Then she killed the line and popped the cokes again. If they triangulated, they'd find a dead snake. She didn't try to run. She didn't have to. Running would stack her with the men flooding the exits. Instead she moved against the grain, back into the service vein, using the maintenance map in her head. At each junction she bled the compound a little more, kicked a breaker, jammed a door with a wedge of scrap, dragged a crate across a choke point and left it looking accidental. She didn't need the place to fall. She needed it to tire. Near dawn the first delayed charge finished its story. A section of roof sagged and gave, not in a dramatic collapse but in a heavy kneel that bent rebar and swallowed a corridor. The shouting turned to questions. She worked the laundry again, found 2 uniforms close enough to her size, and stuffed one in her satchel for later. In a storage bin she found burner phones, cheap and greasy with use. She broke 3, pocketed 1, and slid the rest into a mop bucket she set under a slow leak. When water reached the junction strip, the phones would die and take a few numbers with them. She took what proof mattered: flash drives, a hand-drawn route sketch pinned under a paperweight, a coated sheet taped inside a binder. She didn't photograph it. She took it. Paper lies less than memory does when men start doubting survivors. By noon the chlorine stink had faded and been replaced by the raw smell of broken drywall and wet dust. Fewer voices moved as a unit. More moved alone, peeling off to check damage or argue at dead panels. She used that. Twice she crossed a hall with a shoulder slump and a muttered complaint and passed within arm's length of men who didn't see a problem with a maintenance worker in a maintenance hall. Routine is a blanket. She wrapped herself in it. The day stretched and thinned. She ate what she could steal: half a protein bar from a desk, a handful of dry rice, a sip of someone's cold tea. She kept water steady and pain-mapped. The bruises on her ribs were dark now, but they were just marks. Her breath was good. Her hands were good. Night came again and with it the hunt. They had figured out too late they were missing a cleaner pattern. Orders sharpened. Boots beat in groups. The commander she'd left cuffed would have found his voice by now. She burned the last of his time with a 6-minute surprise and slipped back to the roof with a coil of calm wire, a broken strobe she re-gutted, and a towel. She made an IR marker from the strobe's guts and the towel strip, lashed it to a vent, and set it to blink a code the rescue birds would recognize if they were anywhere near. 3 days bled like that. Move, bleed the system, transmit in 30-second knives, go dark. She never fired a shot on the roof. She didn't need to pick fights. Men did it for her in the halls below when systems lied and doors jammed and clocks disagreed. On the third dawn, wind carried a low, familiar chop through the peaks. She felt it in her teeth before she heard it, a rhythm that didn't belong to trucks or generators. She keyed the micro again. Air, this is Viper. IR beacon north roof, code 31. Pop smoke on visual and stand off. You've got sporadic small arms from south face. I hold intel and a package. The response came clean: Viper, we have your strobe. Hold your mark. Bird 2 is checking your south. LZ not stable. Can you move to the east spur? She swept her eyes. East spur was jagged rock and a narrow saddle she could reach without crossing a skylined ridge if she stayed low. Affirm. 2 minutes. If you don't see the strobe, look for mirror flash. Copy. 2 minutes. She cut the strobe, stripped the jacket, and slid the spare uniform over sweat and dust. She stuffed binders and drives into the satchel, tightened the strap, and belly crawled to the drop, then down a gutter, then across a roof seam to a stack of broken pallets that made a ladder if you imagined it was one. The valley opened to the east like a gray mouth. She pushed into it, keeping the ridge at her shoulder and her silhouette low. Once, rounds cracked high and wild from the south face, panic fire for a ghost they couldn't fix. She didn't look back. At the saddle she unrolled the towel, used a shard of plastic as a mirror, and threw a tight flash down the line the pilots were expecting. The first Black Hawk banked, keeping safe altitude, the second offset. She felt the click of their gaze as they found the sign. She stood, just enough, and waved once. The rotors deepened as the wingman slid a door gun to the south to discourage anyone with ideas. The lead hovered, nose into wind, 20 meters off the spur. She sprinted the last 15 yards, heat and rotor wash shredding her breath, and leapt. Hands grabbed her vest, dragged her in. The door slammed. She pressed the satchel into the crew chief's chest. Intel. Multiple nodes. Confirm FOB threat aborted. He nodded, face serious and bright with the relief of a clean pickup. The pilot lifted, rolling left. The compound shrank, still coughing smoke. In the cabin light, her world narrowed to straps, metal, and the thump of rotors. The crew chief handed her water and a headset. A voice came on, calm, clipped, American. "Viper, this is Major Reeves. You're safe. We'll debrief as soon as your wheel's down. I'm looking at your first packet. It's something." She leaned her head back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes for one breath. "Copy, Major," she said. "Recommend tasking teams to the locations marked red 1, 2, 3. Their timetables hinged on this compound. Take those, and the rest folds." "We're already moving," he said. "And, Sergeant, what you just did. We don't have a box to put that in." She looked out at the gray line of the mountains sliding by, small and far now. Her ribs ached. Her hands were steady. Below, the valley that thought it owned time receded into its own dust. "There wasn't a box down there either," she said. "Just walls. I used their corners." "Understood," he said. "Welcome home. Wheels in 20. She nodded once and let the sound of the rotors carry the last 3 days off her skin. The work wasn't finished. It had just changed rooms. Wheels kissed tarmac, the rotor wash rolled away, and the noise of the valley gave up its place to the clean, clinical hum of a stateside hangar. Val stepped down with the satchel tight to her ribs and followed the line of tape toward a door where MPs and medics stood waiting. The air tasted like jet fuel and floor wax. A medic shined a penlight, checked pupils, counted breath, checked ribs. She waved off the pain meds. Paper needed her more than morphine did. Major Reeves met her in a quiet room off the flight line, a table, 2 chairs, a recorder between them. He didn't start with a speech. He slid water across and hit record. She gave him time and distances first, then names and diagrams, then the cadence of the compound, how the pump ticked 12, then 11, how the camera clicked in a lazy arc, how a man with a limp taught her the door grades without meaning to. She laid the drives out in a row. He kept his questions clean and short. When she finished, he sat back, pen still. "We've already rolled on red 1, he said. 2 and 3 are next. Your codes check out." She nodded. "They lean on the central clock," she said. "Shift it and they stumble." "We shifted it," he said. "You gave us the hand." They moved to a larger room as the team pulled screens on. Analysts walked her through the nodes she'd marked. In feed windows, men in ball caps moved through alleys 2 continents away, vehicles turned around before checkpoints they suddenly didn't like. Pieces came off the board without drama. Reeves never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The work was quiet because the math was right. When the first field team confirmed Red 1 was cold and empty of weapons it had been sure of yesterday, Reeves looked over at Val. He didn't smile. He only said, "That's 1." Hours later, 2 and 3 followed. No fireworks. Just still pictures of dismantled routes and empty lockers. She felt the tightness in her shoulders ease an inch. 100 men would not be getting a letter this month. That was enough celebration. Med cleared her for light duty. Command wanted a citation draft. Reeves waved off the ceremony talk. "We'll handle that later," he said. "For now, I need you to sleep." She looked at the clock and shook her head. "If I sleep now I'll wake up at midnight and think the drain is talking again. Let me walk." He understood. He sent an escort who stayed 50 feet back and pretended not to be there. She found a bench near the PT field and sat with the satchel at her boots. Evening came slow, the kind that turns everything gray before it turns gold. The noise of a bass at shift change drifted past, boots on concrete, laughter from somewhere you don't see, a whistle from a field. She let her breath settle into that rhythm and let the maps fade until the only picture left was Gallatin Range at dawn, fog snagged in the firs, Ghost Hawk placing a tin mug on a stump and saying to look, listen, then move. Whisper's hand on her shoulder, guiding her weight between pine needles so they wouldn't complain. Not lessons. Habits. The kind you keep when your hands are empty and the camera red light won't blink. Morning brought the paperwork she couldn't dodge, medical recheck, a formal statement, a short, controlled meeting with people who wore suits and the habit of staring. She said what mattered and left what didn't. Reeves walked her to the door afterward. "We'll declass enough to teach the method," he said. "You good with that?" "Teach the parts that don't get kids killed," she said. "Not the tricks. The thinking." "Agreed," he said. "You'll brief at Bragg next month." Small room. Right people. They gave her a week. She spent it doing small things that felt like stitches, running short hills, fixing a zipper on a ruck that had saved a cable, writing down 12 lines of notes about pump cycles and camera motors for a lesson plan. She ate like a human. She slept in a real bed and woke at 0300 anyway, listened to the silence, and didn't panic when it didn't answer back. When she flew to Fort Bragg, the room was as advertised, small, a dozen operators and medics, a whiteboard, a box of dry erase markers that always die too fast. She drew a rectangle and wrote, "Walls are diagrams," on top. No poetry. Just a framework. She walked them through what you can know when you think you can't know anything. Schedule is a river, cameras get tired in the same places, men lie to panels when panels lie to men. She showed them how to make fear move sideways instead of forward. She made them time a blind spot with their breathing until the board's ticking clock felt like a partner, not a threat. One kid asked, "Ma'am, what if they don't make mistakes?" She capped the pen. "They will," she said. "Because they're people. Your job is to be there when they do." Another asked about pain. "Map it," she said. "Name it. It's data. Don't ignore it and don't honor it." A medic asked how to carry 2 missions at once, care and fight. She nodded once. "You don't split. You stack. Care is the fight. The fight is care." Between sessions she stood at the back door and watched jump birds circle. A man with a coffee mug stopped and said he'd seen the report. He didn't ask for a story. He said, "Glad you're back," and moved on. That was the right size. Weeks later, Reeves found her on the range. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter with fewer adjectives than she expected, which was perfect. It said promotion and assignment options. It also said thank you without saying thank you. She folded it once and put it in a pocket. "What do you want?" he asked. "Work," she said. "Real work." "You'll get it," he said. "Just not like last time." She nodded. "You can't plan last times. You plan the first 3 moves after the first mistake, and you make sure the first mistake isn't yours." On a quiet Sunday she called home. Ghost Hawk didn't ask for the report. Whisper asked if she still had the leather cord. She touched it. "Yes," she said. "It did its job." Whisper laughed softly. "So did you." The bass moved around her, constant and ordinary. She liked that. It meant the machine kept running, not because of medals, but because people did the next right thing in the next right minute. She wrote the last line of her lesson on the board the following day and left it there when she walked out. Adapt. Use their corners. Make the enemy visible. Then she went to the field and taught them how to breathe to the camera motor's lazy click. If there is a moral, it isn't flashy. It isn't about never being trapped. It's about what you do when the room closes and the schedule owns your heartbeat. You read the room. You move when the river will carry you. You turn walls into diagrams and fear into somebody else's problem. And when you finally step into daylight, you remember it didn't happen because you are a myth. It happened because you kept showing up for the next breath, the next inch, the next quiet choice that made the loud thing break in your favor. The work wasn't finished. It never is. But it was in a better room now, with better clocks, and people ready to use them.